casting aspersions on crypto there, because that's what we're going to cover next. And hopefully we're going to talk about how crypto is actually inherently traceable and transparent, and that actually brings more security to crypto transactions than traditional fiat transactions. Not something that is often the subject of what the media covers, not very sexy to say that crypto is actually transparent and free from criminal abuse, but today hopefully I'm going to show you how that is actually the case using some blockchain analytics case studies. So at Elliptic, we believe in the power of crypto, and our vision is a world that is freer, fairer, and safer for all because of crypto. Freer because it allows access by the unbanked and those in jurisdictions where their freedoms are restricted. Fairer because it reduces barriers to entry to financial markets. And safer because we believe crypto enables transparency and security in a financial system that has never been seen before. So I'm Simone, and I'm the CEO of Elliptic. We're a London-based blockchain analytics firm, and I'm here to tell you about how for the past almost 10 years, we have been building blockchain analytics capabilities to help us fight the next generation of cybercriminals. So to bring that to life, we're going to be looking at a specific real-world case study around Conti. Now, I know there are lots of experts in the room around ransomware that probably know more about Conti than I do, but we're going to use them to explore how they have been trying to launder the funds from their criminal exploits over the last few years. Now, ransomware, as everyone knows, is software that is developed to help block up and take down systems and networks. And they have, in recent years, been coming to crypto as their means of payment of choice. Now, ransomware predates crypto by a long period of time, but they've really embraced crypto because of its speed of settlement and its ability to move funds across borders. And it's perceived, and that's the really important work, perceived anonymity that's baked in. So let's talk a little bit about Conti. So Conti's been around for about 20 years, and Conti is really big business. At its peak, they were clearing, turning over about $6 million a month in ransomware payments. And it's associated with a Russian group called Wizard Spider. So they're believed to operate, or at least originate, out of Russia. And it's a global business. They've perpetrated attacks everywhere from Scotland to Denmark to New Zealand and Peru. But perhaps their best known attack has been in Costa Rica, where they successfully took down at least a dozen government agencies in Costa Rica through a ransomware attack. And ultimately, that resulted in the Costa Rican government declaring a state of emergency. They're also completely sector agnostic and have taken down high-end jewelers to high-end fashion and electronics retailers and everything in between. And so while they'd had a pretty successful 20 years, the fairy tale started unraveling earlier this year. And it all started with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the pro-Russian elements inside the Conti organization came out pretty quickly in favor of the invasion. Meanwhile, the pro-Ukrainian elements retaliated very quickly by releasing some of the internal chat logs from the Conti organization. And these chat logs are really critical and essential to what we do to building up a picture using open source information to try to understand who is who when it comes to who's moving funds in crypto. So by combining this type of open source intel with blockchain analytics, we can start revealing how the Conti organization actually worked. So another reason that Conti started unraveling earlier this year was that perhaps with the Costa Rican hack, they went a step too far. And that garnered a lot of attention, unwanted attention, in particular from the US State Department, which ultimately put a bounty on some of the leadership of Conti, $10 million bounty on the Conti leadership, as well as a $5 million bounty on anyone found to be using the Conti ransomware strain. So those two things together, bringing a lot of unwanted attention onto Conti and ultimately have led to their unraveling. So we're going to start taking a look now at how they worked and what they started doing with the money. But before we do that, we just have to speak for a moment about the business model of ransomware, which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with. Conti operates as an affiliate model, which means that they outsource a lot of their infiltration of businesses and governments to others by paying them essentially a share of the revenue that they generate from any hacks. And we're going to talk here about a few different actors in our story. We've got three of the Conti leadership, three individuals called Target, Professor, and Stern. And then we're going to have the unknown affiliate as well, and we'll see them taking their share of the funds. So now we know a little bit about who the actors are, we can start following the money. So some of what we're going to show on the screen is a simplified view, just for the purposes of this presentation, because it can get pretty complicated. But we're going to start here. So this is where we are essentially providing a visualization of the blockchain. In this case, it's the Bitcoin blockchain. The ransoms were requested in Bitcoin. And so here we can see the first transaction of 75 Bitcoin, which is about $825,000 at the time, moving from one address, which is one circle, to another address. And so what this is a visual representation of a transaction that it has been mined in the Bitcoin blockchain. And every time a block is mined, important information is sort of committed in that block. And that is information that's then publicly available, it's immutable, it cannot be changed, it's completely transparent. And that information will contain the value of the transaction, when it took place, date and time stamped, as well as the sender's address and the receiver's address. And those addresses are not anonymous, they're pseudonymous. So it will be a string of letters and numbers that makes up the Bitcoin address in this case, and all of that information is locked into the block when it is mined. And that is information that Elliptic, through blockchain analytics, we're consuming and processing all the time to try to make sense of that big data resource. So this is that first transaction. We can assume here that the transaction on the far left is the insurer or the company themselves paying the ransom in order to release their files. So now we've seen that the 75 Bitcoin have gone into the Conti wallet, and that starts getting moved around pretty quickly, and it's split into three. The majority, the first 22 goes down into the Conti wallet, and then there are two separate transactions of 19 and 33 Bitcoin that go off to some of our individuals that were named as part of the Conti leaks. We've got Professor and we've got Target. So they're taking their shares of the funds here. So this is where we're combining the open source intelligence that we took from the Conti leaks that identified some of the perpetrators with the blockchain analytics and combining that information to start building the picture. So in terms of what happens next, it can start to get pretty complicated. So the next step is that the Conti affiliate, the entity that actually perpetrated the crime on behalf of Conti, receives their share. And one of the really interesting things that we can see straight away when we plot this using blockchain analytics is that this is not the first time that the affiliate has received funds by doing work on behalf of Conti. So in the past, well, in total, they've received almost $700,000 by using the Conti strain in order to infiltrate different organizations. So now Professor and Target have got the proceeds of the crime. What are they going to do with it next? This is where they start laundering the funds, and this is a process they need to go through before they can actually start using them. They're looking for a way to ultimately obfuscate the trail and ultimately cash out. And so what we can see here is the first of their money laundering techniques, and maybe one of the more basic ones. This is what we would call a peeling chain. This is one of the common typologies we see with criminals looking to launder their funds. They are taking time to create new wallets in an attempt to complicate and obfuscate that trail and stop investigators from ultimately being able to follow the money. But using blockchain analytics, we can simplify that process of following the funds. And what we actually see, it's not labeled on here, but what we can actually see is most of the funds move 100% from one wallet to another. There is now automated technology that the criminals are using, which can create many hundreds of wallets in seconds to try to create incredibly long and complex trails. So, sorry. Pressed too quickly. I just need to wait for this animation to roll, and I'm just going to step back 1 second. Okay, so what we'll see at the end of the peeling chain is the second typology that the Conti ransomware operators will deploy. And this is a typology that's a little bit newer, it's a bit more complex, it's a bit more time-consuming and expensive, but you can see them starting to experiment with these new typologies in order to get ahead of the investigators. And that's the cluster that you can see here in blue called REN. And so this is where the funds have gone through a number of different peeling chains and have now been reconsolidated in the hope that they've lost the trail. But if the investigators haven't, they're going to use one further typology, which is to move their funds through the REN bridge. The REN bridge, REN BTC, is a bridge that allows you to really easily transfer from one blockchain and set of assets into another blockchain. And while it's possible to do that without bridges, bridges enable us to do that more quickly and with lower transaction fees. So as an individual that would be using cryptocurrencies, it's really valuable, it's really helpful. But of course, as with lots of technological innovations, it's usually adopted by the criminals first. And they've been very quick to start using bridges to swap between lots of different assets, tokens, and blockchains, again in the hope that the investigators will lose the trail of what they've done with the funds. What happens after they go through the bridge is that they then start looking for venues to cash out from crypto assets into fiat currency. Thanks to regulation, that's getting harder and harder to cash out into legitimate exchanges, but there are a number of exchanges still around the world, and in particular, Conti use here a Russian exchange that has recently been put on the OFAC list. So that's where they ultimately turn some of this cryptocurrency into Russian rubles. So just to sort of illustrate a bit more what's happening in a bridge, this is an example of something that Conti might use to turn what was in the beginning their Bitcoin into lots of different types of tokens and assets. They use wrapped Bitcoin here, they use DAI, I think they use USDT at the end before then converting out through the exchange. So a simple graphic of something that's actually can be quite complicated. So cross-chain tracing, cross-chain hopping is what we now consider to be the next frontier in money laundering in crypto. And it's now possible, using blockchain analytics, to systematically trace through these bridges to try to understand what the criminals are doing with their funds. we've recently released some research that shows that over $4 billion of illicit funds have been laundered using this technique, using these bridges, and $1 billion of that related specifically to laundering the proceeds of thefts, and probably one of the most well-known thefts as part of that $1 billion, $500 million of that was the proceeds of a theft perpetrated by the North Korean hacking group, the Lazarus Group, after they hacked into the popular game Axie Infinity and stole a lot of cryptocurrency there, and they used the cross-chain bridge to obfuscate the trail of funds. So this is what we consider to be the next frontier of money laundering in crypto, but thanks to blockchain analytics, we're able to keep up with these abuses of this really powerful technology and actually provide a high degree of transparency, traceability, and security in the blockchain. Thank you very much.